Alright, good morning. I'm Aaron Heiser of Maker's Leather Supply, and we are going to continue on our little series that we've been doing on our simple card wallet. Okay, what we're going to be doing now is actually assembling and sewing it together. So we're going to learn the basics of hand sewing using stitching chisels, and yeah, let's get to it. Now, the first things first. Again, this is a very simple project. It consists of 3 pieces of leather. Here's our outside piece, and then we've got 2 inside pieces that we're going to sew to it. Okay? Now, if I was a man of just endless resources and whatever, I could also line the entire inside piece of this with this type of leather, and it would look really nice. I would just glue the entire thing to the back of this, trim it out, and then put these on, stitch all the way around. Okay, but again, we're doing it simply. This is a very beginner's video, so we're just gonna follow the actual pattern, which is just 3 pieces of leather, and we're gonna glue these 2 pieces onto it, and we're gonna sew it all together. Now, what do we do about this fuzzy back? Okay, it's rough, it's fuzzy. It doesn't look bad by any means, but it's rough and fuzzy, and everything else on this is going to be nice and smooth. So we're going to do a little trick. I'm going to take my water bottle, okay, just regular old water, just like we used in the tooling video, or the stamping video, and I'm just going to spray this thing with some water. I'm not going to soak it, okay, but I do need to make sure it's got good coverage. I'm going to wipe off the excess water, because God knows what kind of dye and paint and everything else is probably just sitting on this cutting mat waiting to be a part of my leather project. There we go. Now, ensuring that this is down on something smooth, I'm going to rub on the back of it with a glass slicker. Now, you don't have to use a glass slicker. You could use a wooden stick. You could use whatever you got. But I'm just going to gently rub on it. And what that's going to do is compress and smooth those fibers down and make it pretty. Now, I'm not pressing hard because I don't want to stretch the leather, okay? I just want to compress those fibers. It's best if you kind of do it every which way you can imagine. And then they'll stay compressed, and while it won't be completely smooth, it'll have a much nicer appearance to it, okay? So there we go. That's about all I'm going to do, because again, I don't want to screw this thing up by pressing too hard or doing it too much. Now, the next thing I need to do is glue it together. The best way to glue 2 pieces of leather together is using a contact cement, okay? There's quite a few different ones out there on the market. In our store, we have 2. We have a water-based one and a solvent-based one. I like the solvent-based one. I like it a lot. But I've been using this water-based one a lot just to really experiment with it and learn what all it can do and stuff. The great thing about the water-based one is it doesn't stink. That solvent-based one, especially like, let's say I'm giving a class and I've got 15 people all gluing projects together, like, you'd better have some serious ventilation, because it's going to get everyone in that room feeling just happy and jolly. Okay? So, water-based. So, I have my little thing of water-based glue. I've got my pockets, I've got my main body here, and then I've got this handy dandy little glue spreader. Now, you don't need a fancy glue spreader. You can use a little piece of scrap wood, a little piece of scrap leather, a little piece of paper. It doesn't matter. But I like this because it's silicone, so therefore this water-based glue, when I use it with this silicone spreader, when it dries on here, I can just peel it off and use the spreader again. So I kind of like it. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take these pockets and I'm going to put them up on my project. And I'm going to reach underneath the edges of them with my fingernail here and just kind of indent the leather just a little bit, because I want to know where to stop putting glue. And I don't want to use a pen to do that, because I don't want to have a permanent mark that somebody will see. And okay, and I did them, again, I did it up underneath there a little bit. I didn't do it right out here on the edge where it would be seen in my finished project. Okay, and then I need to do the exact same thing on the other side. So I'm going to line my pocket up just like I need it to set on there. Reach up under there with my thumbnail. Make a little indentation. Okay? Those indentions are very difficult to see, but they're there and I can see them. Yeah. So, contact cement, how it works best is you put a coating of it on each side of the two things, or on each piece that you're going to stick together. So I'm going to put a little bit of it on the edges of this, and then I'm going to put a little bit of it on the edge of the pocket itself, and then once it's dry, I'm going to stick the two pieces together. Okay, so I'm going to get just a little bit of it here on my my applicator. Okay, and I'm just going to spread it. I don't want it any further on there than it needs to be to hold those two pieces together. So tiny bit more than 1/8 of an inch, but less than 1/4 on this project, which would be what, 3/16. So that's the other thing I like about this applicator. It's wide and it's real easy to get a very precise application with it. Okay, so I'm just going to put a little of it on there. Now the water-based glue is it's really easy to know when it's ready to use. It looks white right now, but it'll look clear when it's dry enough for me to stick it together. Okay, now I did that piece. Now I'm going to do the 3 edges of this piece that'll stick to it. Okay, and I mean that's all I'm sticking is three edges, because it's a pocket. It needs to be open, right? I'm not gluing the entire thing down. And I do want to get that glue all the way out to the edge, because it'll create a really nice edge for us to burnish later, which will be a whole nother video. Okay. There we go. Okay, now this thing has 2 pockets to it, so I'm going to go ahead and do the other side and the other little pocket, and I'll just do it really quickly, and then we're going to stick these pieces together in a minute. Alright, now again, I'm going to let these 2 pieces, or these 3 pieces, set up just a little bit more until the glue is not white anymore and it's just clear. Then I'll stick these things together. So we're going to pause the video until that's ready to go. Alright, so all my glue is dried to the point that it's clear all the way around. Maybe hard to see on the camera. But anyway, now I just got to stick the 2 pieces together. And contact cement's funny because once it's dry, it doesn't feel sticky at all. Neither of these 2 surfaces feel sticky, but they're sure as heck going to stick together. Okay, so usually I'll start with a corner and kind of press it a little bit, and then I'll go down a straight line, making sure everything lines up. And you don't want to press these 2 pieces together until you know they're lined up, because once you press them together, they're going to be pretty difficult to peel apart. Again, it doesn't seem like it's sticky, but it's sticking. Alright, so there's one. Now I got another one. Okay, and then I just press down my edges real nicely. There we go. Now this thing will fold in half this way, and it'll make a nice little card wallet once it's sewn, but we got to sew it still, right? So, first thing we need to do is create a line for our stitch line. So we're going to bring back our wing dividers that we used earlier when we created this border, and we're going to set them up for about 1/8 of an inch in from the edge there, okay? There we go. And we're just going to scribe a very light line. It doesn't have to be heavy. Go in the perimeter of this project. Okay. Again, the corners are rounded, so you don't want to have a square stitch line and a rounded corner, kind of like what we did with the tooling. You want to round it, so go around the corner. Don't just stop with a angle. Okay. And again, you may not be able to see this from here, from your camera angle, but it just scribes a nice little line in there that we'll go back through with our stitching chisels and use that as our guideline to stitch. Now, I have a set of the same stitching chisels that we put out with our schools program. These are 4mm stitching chisels, so there'd be 4mm between each stitch hole, I guess you could say. Okay. Now, I always use a maul with tools like this, no matter if I'm tooling or setting rivets or whatever. If you use a maul, it's not going to damage the tool. If you use a metal hammer, expect to replace your tool over time. Okay. The other thing is, this is a piece of conveyor belt material. Basically, when you're using these stitching irons, you need to be able to go all the way through the leather plus a little bit. Okay, so a piece of rubber or something like that, you do not want to use your HDPE cutting board. You definitely don't want to use this type of cutting mat, and you definitely don't want to use your granite surface underneath your stitching chisels. But in a pinch, you can take a few layers of scrap leather and glue them together and make yourself a nice little pad that you can do this over. Okay? But all I'm going to do is I'm going to just be right on top of that line with my stitching chisels, knock it through there, pull my stitching chisels out, and now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the last tine, the prong of the stitching chisel, I'm going to put it in the last hole that I had created there so that I have proper marking for where I'm going to do a few more. Okay? And that's how we're going to do this all the way around the project. I'm going to get to a corner right quick so I can show you how I'll go around a corner. But here we have, this one has 6 tines on it, 6 prongs. But in this same set, I have one with 4 prongs, one with 2 prongs, and one with 1 prong. So as you have to go around something like a curve or a corner or something like that, you can use the smaller ones to get around that radius or that corner. Okay. Now here I am right at the edge. So I'm going to pull out at the corner. So I'm going to pull out my little 2-prong one here and just keep going. Keep in mind, if you were hitting a 6-prong, now you're hitting a 2-prong. You don't have to hit it as hard. Okay, it's not near as hard to hit with only 2 prongs, and you don't want to send it through your cutting surface there. Now I'm going to go around this corner. I can take my single prong and do 1 right there in the curve, or I can take this 2 here and I'm just going to kind of split the difference. And again, it will have, when I sew it, it will have a rounded corner appearance. I'll show you in just a second as I do a couple more. There you go. All right, so I'm going to do the rest of these, and I'll do the whole fast forward trick with the video camera, so it'll look like I'm working incredibly quick. And we'll get these knocked in here, and then we're going to learn how to hand stitch. All right, there we are. got all of our stitching holes that go through both sides. Okay? Now, I'm going to turn the camera off for 10 seconds because I've got to set up everything I need to hand stitch. When I come back, that's what we'll be doing. Okay, so here I have my stitching clamp. Okay, it's just a big old clamp that I can put a piece of leather in. Because to do what's called the saddle stitch, which is the stitch that you're going to use to sew your leather projects together, you need 2 hands free. Okay, I understand you may not have a fancy clamp like I do, but you'd be amazed what you can make one out of. You can take 2 pieces of wood and a C-clamp or a pair of vice grips or whatever, or you can even just clamp it to your table or whatever you need to do. Have a friend hold it. It's just easier if you've got 2 hands to do your stitching. My buddy Doc that works here at the store, he does not use a stitching clamp at all, and it drives me insane, but that's his way. So everybody's got their own way of doing things, and I'm a huge advocate that there's a million ways to skin the cat, and whatever way that works for you, that's the right way for you. I also have me a roll of hand stitching thread here. This is a 0.8mm thread. And I have 2 sewing needles because we need 2 sewing needles to do the saddle stitch. Now I'm going to pull me off about a wingspan of thread here, maybe a little bit more than that. I would like to have enough thread to go all the way around my project. If I don't, there is a way to splice the thread onto it and add more to it, but I don't want to in this video. So I'm going to thread my needle, and then I'm going to pull 8 to 10 inches or so through the needle and just let it fold back. Some people will do this fancy little thing where they send the needle back, like run it, make it go through the thread and then pull that down, and it makes a nice little knot and locks the needle on. I've done it before, but I don't necessarily find it my best way. Again, you might find it that it's your best way. I don't know. Get the... Alright, thread the other needle here. This other needle's got a bunch of wax in it. Hang on a second. There's something to get the wax out of it with. There we go. Hand sewing thread usually has wax on it, and it helps it to slide through all these holes without getting all frayed up. So that's why there's wax in the needle. The last thing I sewed with that needle probably had a lot of wax content to it. Now, when I start hand sewing, I never start in like a corner. I always start in the middle of something. Okay, if I start in the corner, to me that's a high wear spot. So I just like to start, a few stitches in from the edge. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the needle in, and I'm going to pull it halfway through so that I have equal amounts of thread on both sides of my project, okay? And now that I've got that, and I've got my 2 needles, and I've got my project, I'm ready to go. So, I'm going to go in, okay, on a wallet. I always call the outside the front side, and then the inside of the wallet is the back side. I have friends that I argue with on that point. They say, no, you always are staring at the inside of the wallet, so it's the front side. But like when you take a picture of a wallet that you just finished or something, generally you're taking a picture of the outside if it's tooled. Anyway, whatever side you want to start with is fine, but consistency is the key when you're hand sewing. Your stitches will all look exactly the same if you do them all exactly the same, okay? So I'm going to take my needle, I'm going to put it in from the back side to the front, and I'm going to pull it all the way through. I'm going to pull it back here, and I'm going to kind of pull it towards my chin. I pull it towards my chin because then I remember to pull the next one towards my chin. And then I'm going to take the front one, or the other needle, and put it in the same hole going the opposite direction. And then I pull it through. Just like that. Okay? Now, again, as long as I do every single stitch exactly like that, they're all going to look exactly the same. So I put the back one through, pull it up toward my chin, put the front one through, pull it up also towards my chin. And then when you pull them tight, you want to pull them You're not trying to hulk it in there. You're not trying to pull so tight that it just busts through the leather. Okay, but you want to pull it reasonably tight. And the same thing with that. If you pull one stitch super tight and the next one not, and you leave it kind of loose, they're not going to look the same. So consistency is the key. I have every sewing machine you can imagine. And I do like my sewing machines. But with small projects like wallets, honestly, I still prefer to hand sew them because I can stitch way prettier than that machine can. Okay? So, here we go. I'm just going to keep on doing the exact same thing. Back needle in first, pull it towards through to the front, then the front needle to the back, pull them both tight. Okay? It is that simple. The only change is once we get to the end, what do? You don't tie a knot. A lot of people think you tie a knot to stop your stitches, and you don't. You just, well, I'll show you when we get to the end. But anyway, this is hand stitching 101 right here. It is super simple, and the basic rule is consistency. No matter how you do it the same for every single stitch, and it will look consistent and nice. Alright, so let me do one more stitch here and then I'll kind of give you a close-up of what we're looking at. So there's what my stitches look like. Alright, so I'm going to stop the recording. I'm going to go all the way around this project. And when I get back to the beginning where I'm at the first stitch I started with, I'll show you what we do to stop to tie off our stitch. Alright, I have sewn all the way around this project and I'm back to my first couple of stitches here, and I'm going to show you how easy this is to complete your stitch without having to tie a knot. Okay? All you got to do. Do one more stitch here. All I'm going to do, even though my very next stitch runs into my original set of stitches there, is I'm just going to do 2 to 3 more stitches. That's it. Then I'm going to cut my tails of my thread off and be done. So here's what that looks like. Once again, just like before, going back side to front side to back side, pulling tight. Okay? Now, I'm just going to stitch over those existing stitches right there. Okay? Now it does get a little bit more tough to pull the thread through the hole because now you got 4 pieces of thread going through that hole and not just 2. But there's 1 stitch. There's 2 stitches. And then just for good measure, let's do 1 more again. Okay? So we'll do 3 stitches. And there you go. And this is why I don't start my stitch on a corner, or I don't start it where, like, I wouldn't start it where these pockets are on the back side, like right at the edge of that pocket, because again, those are high wear spots and you don't want to start your stitch there. Okay, and yes, there's a tiny bit more thread in those 3 stitch holes, but you don't really see it. You got to really be looking for it. Okay, now how do I cut my thread off nice and even with my project? Take a super sharp blade, okay, something sharp. I'm going to stick it into my little stitching pony here, and then I'm just going to wiggle my thread up against the blade, and it'll cut it off right there at the base. I don't need to burn it, I don't need to do anything to it. It's already cut, and it's right there flush, and it's pretty. And what this does, when you just wiggle the thread instead of wiggling the blade, is it makes it to where once the thread cuts, your blade doesn't accidentally slip and cut your leather or cut the next piece of next stitch or something like that. Okay? So there it is. Now, we're nice and hand stitched. Let me zoom out just a tiny bit. Nice and hand stitched all the way around. There's what the back side looks like. Real pretty. In the very next project video, we're going to do the edges on this thing real quick, and we're going to be done with it. We have done a complete project. So until then, I'm Aaron Heiser of Maker's Leather Supply, and we'll see you soon.